Well, can you believe we're already past the midpoint of the college football season? I mean, it's depressing to think about, but what's most definitely not depressing is the fact that I was 3-0 last week on my college football bets, made a little bit of money. That brings us to 9-6 on the year. We were only 500 heading into last week, so it was nice to have an undefeated week, get comfortably in the black here. Have 4 games I like this week. Want to go through them one by one. Want to start in the SEC. LSU going on the road to take on Texas A&M. LSU currently installed as a 3.5-point favorite in this game on BETDAQ. 52.5 the total. And I do like A&M. I like the home underdog here. I am backing Texas A&M plus 3.5 in this game. Listen, I know LSU comes with a big reputation, and they come off a big win, that home win last week over South Carolina. And the LSU defense, extremely impressive as always. And it does make me a little nervous in this game to be betting on a team that is going to be dominated on both lines of scrimmage. I do expect LSU to push Texas A&M around in this game a little bit, but they are just not going to be able to score enough points, I don't believe, to keep up in this game. I mean, even though they're going to have success against the Texas A&M offense, I mean, I don't expect A&M to score 50-some-odd points like they did on Louisiana Tech last week. I mean, have you seen A&M play this year? This is a similar scheme to what Dana Holgerson's doing in West Virginia, except for A&M runs the ball with a little bit more success. I mean, they are impressive offensively. And while LSU is good on defense, I wouldn't quite call them dominant. I mean, they're really good, especially in the front seven, but they're not going to be able to hold A&M under 20 or 24 or so points. I think A&M is at least going to get that many. Maybe they might even break the 30-point barrier, but can LSU score that many? Hey, I know A&M is not as good on defense as South Carolina was last week or Florida the week before, but LSU is so unimpressive on offense, especially at the quarterback position. I mean, I am guilty. I am one of the many people who, just because Zach Mettenberger was a 5-star recruit, just because he started off at Georgia, I had never seen him throw a pass coming into this season, but I fell into the trap, and I was saying that LSU is going to be improved at the quarterback position, because obviously they weren't getting much from Jordan Jefferson and Jarrett Lee. Quarterback's really been a problem area for LSU for a few years now. So I thought Mettenberger was going to be an improvement, and he is not. I mean, those people who are waiting on him to come around, I think what we've seen from Zach Mettenberger, I think that's pretty much what he is. He is just not very good at all. So while LSU is going to have success running the ball in this game, and I expect them to run it frequently and try to control the clock and keep Texas A&M off the field, I just don't think they're going to score enough points to justify being a 3.5-point favorite here on the road. I am on Texas A&M plus 3.5. Next game, Nebraska going on the road to face Northwestern. Nebraska a 6.5-point road favorite on BETDAQ. 61.5 the total on this game. And again, I'm backing another road underdog. I like Northwestern to the points in this game. Northwestern plus 6.5. Listen, Northwestern, don't sleep on this team. 6-1 against the spread this year. What about that? Now, full disclosure, the one game they failed to cover against Penn State, I was backing Northwestern. I've bet on Northwestern one time this year, and it was the only time they failed to cover. I was watching that game. They had an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter, and they still blew it. They still lost that game. So, hey, maybe I put the hex on Northwestern. We'll see this week, but I'm getting back on the horse, betting on Northwestern again. I think reputation, Nebraska's living on reputation a lot here. Certainly, Nebraska, with their tradition and history, a great football program. People expect Nebraska to be good. They were expected to be good this year. They've been disappointing. In all the games Nebraska has played against teams who are competitive, good teams. You know, I'm talking about Ohio State, which they lost to last week. Wisconsin, a bad Wisconsin team this year. Wisconsin squeaked by squeaked by Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago. And of course, they went out on the road and lost to UCLA early in the year. I mean, they've struggled every time they faced a quality opponent. And Northwestern, despite the fact that they don't have all the history, they don't have all the reputation, Northwestern is most definitely a quality opponent. Pat Fitzgerald has done an excellent job in building that program, and I think they are a good bet as 6.5-point home dogs this week. This Nebraska defense has been very shaky this year. They allowed 63 points to Ohio State in their last game. Nebraska did have a bye last week, which does make me a little nervous. I'm sure they won't play as poorly as they did against Ohio State in their last game still. This defense has not shown enough. I mean, they looked bad against Wisconsin the week before, and Wisconsin has a bad offense. Northwestern underrated on offense. I don't trust the Nebraska defense. I do like Northwestern plus 6.5 at home on Saturday. Next game I want to get to, probably my favorite game of these 4 games, an ACC game. Georgia Tech, a 14-point home favorite over Boston College, and I do like Georgia Tech minus 14. Now, I know you're going to say, whoa, 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 Georgia Tech, this is a terrible team, lost 3 games in a row, haven't covered in any one of those games. I realize that. They have a terrible defense, one of the worst defenses in major college football. I understand that. Georgia Tech fired their defensive coordinator, of course, a couple of weeks ago, Al Groh. They had a bye last week. This is more a bet against Boston College than it is for Georgia Tech. Boston College is just so bad. 1-5 both overall and 1-5 against the spread. This defense is just terrible, and they are so slow in the front seven. I mean, have you seen Boston College play? If you haven't, I mean, you got to watch this team. They're just so slow in the front seven. Saw them play against Florida State last week. They allowed 51 points. Every single decent, functional offense that Boston College has played this year, they have just not been able to stop. They allowed 51 to Florida State, 45 to Clemson, 41 to Miami. They allowed 34 to Army a few weeks ago. I mean, Army, obviously, I would not consider them a functional offense. They ran up and down the field on Boston College, And one thing about Georgia Tech, though their defense has been terrible, there's nothing wrong with this Georgia Tech offense. This triple option scheme that Paul Johnson runs has been as effective as ever this year. In their last 3 games, all losses, Georgia Tech has scored 36, 28, and 31 points. And let me tell you what, they're going to go up and down the field on Boston College this Saturday. The total in this game on BETDAQ right now, 62.5. I lean towards the total, but the bet I like more is Georgia Tech minus 14. Again, Georgia Tech minus 14 is the line here on BETDAQ. I think Georgia Tech is going to absolutely have their way with Boston College in this game. Boston College is not good enough on offense to take advantage of Georgia Tech's bad defense. And Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech is just going to score so many that I really think this is going to be one of those no-sweat type covers. Love Georgia Tech minus 14. Final bet of the Saturday, South Florida going on the road to face Louisville. South Florida, a 6.5-point underdog on BETDAQ, 54.5 the total in this game. I like South Florida. I know South Florida, just like Georgia Tech, I guess it's a little risky here because very similar situation to Georgia Tech. South Florida has not played well recently. They've lost 4 straight games. Like Georgia Tech, they're coming off a bye week. And just like that Georgia Tech game, this is more a bet against Louisville than it is for South Florida. I know Louisville's won all 6 of their games this year, but they've not been impressive in their last 3 games. Uninspiring performances against Florida International, that is, Southern Miss, and Pittsburgh. All 3 of those teams bad this year. I know oftentimes Southern Miss and Pitt, have good programs. Southern Miss and Pitt are both bad teams this year. Louisville has struggled in all 3 of those games. South Florida is better than their record would indicate. This is not a team that's laid down and quit yet. They have an experienced team, a good experienced quarterback, or an experienced quarterback anyway. I know Daniels has his moments. Calling him good might be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think there's that much of a difference to these teams. The records would indicate Louisville being 6-0, South Florida being 2-4. Excuse me. The records would indicate a big difference, but I don't think that's the case. I think these teams are closer than the records would indicate. South Florida, coming off that bye. This is their last chance, I think, to turn around their season. If they were to go on the road and upset an undefeated Louisville team, this would be a big deal to the program. I'm not sure if they're going to pull it off. Not sure if they're going to win. Excuse me, I need to take a sip of Coke here and get a little dry mouth. Still getting over a little bit of a chest cold here, a little bit of a cough. But anyway, not sure South Florida is going to be able to pull out the win in this game, but I do expect them to keep it close. Expect this to be a very competitive game. And I think South Florida plus 6.5 is a good bet. So there you have it. Those are my 4 games this week. Texas A&M plus 3.5 against LSU. Northwestern plus 6.5 against Nebraska. Georgia Tech minus 14 at home against Boston College. And South Florida plus 6.5 against the Louisville Cardinals. All of those lines, of course, are as they are on BETDAQ. Best of luck this week in whatever you decide to do, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interest.